Hi, this is SherLuc, and today we're going to be talking about how to make predictions as a card caster. So, the first thing we need to know is that a CC always has to be in the future of the game, not in the present. If you need to explain something that just happened, it's mainly because you failed to predict it earlier on. For these reasons, the 3 minutes of spectator delay are very important, because that's where you are setting up most of your game, and that's also true for the early game. So, without further ado, let's jump straight into it. We have, first off, identity of the champions. That's the main thing where you want to base your predictions on. So, for example, if I pick this game of Animal Alliance versus White Rose, what we have is, for example, on one side, let's start with White Rose. So we have Camille, Karthus, Syndra, Xayah, and Galio. In terms of identity of the champions, we have scaling. So we know that Camille scales really well into late game, Karthus is a monster in the late game, Syndra prefers mid game, averagely, Xayah is also very much more comfortable in the mid game, does also well in the late, and Galio fits wherever his composition fits. Overall, it makes for a very it makes up for a rather good late game comp. Now, on the opposite, we have Set, Jarvan, Orianna, Aphelios, and Thresh. Set and Jarvan tend to not do that well into late game teamfights and prefer rather the mid stages of the game. Aphelios, monster in the late game, but needs a lot of space to be able to work. Otherwise, he does quite well in the early game, early laning phase, a bit of an oppressive champion, and has a fairly okay-ish mid game. Orianna, kind of the same, to be honest. It's a monster in the later stages of the game, but mid game works out pretty well as well if she has space for it. Now Thresh fits wherever, same as Galio, fits wherever the comp names seem to fit. Overall, we have a comp that likes the mid game very much and does kind of kind of well in the early game. So in terms of scaling, you can already predict that if we were to reach ultra late stage of the game, this comp should be taken over this comp. This also means that in the early game you give an advantage to Animal Alliance, and if they do come out with an advantage, they should be able to make it bigger by the time mid game comes up. That's a prediction. Aggression and playmaking. So we all know about how bloody some champions tend to make the play. How bloodthirsty some champions tend to make the players. So, for example, if you see a Vladimir, you know he's not going to be super active in the early game. Same for Sejuani. That's also a bit of the champion's identity and scaling, as it comes. It most of the time comes down to power spikes. But when you see, for example, Xayah Galio, that's a really good bot lane in the early game. But the thing is that these picks tend to struggle to find opportunities in the early game. So you know that these picks, not really the most aggressive ones. And what you want to predict is who is going to set up the pace slash the tempo in this early game. Out of all of these picks, Jarvan is the one you want to be looking towards. Slightly later on in this game, Orianna, Syndra. These picks that have lots of aggressive potential as the game is in the early stages, and the rest of these picks can't really do anything. For sure, Set might be the one, but then again, he's top lane. He's not really good. He's not really. He doesn't really have that much success in the early game. Blah blah blah. So you want to pay attention to those picks and saying, oh, in the early game, if we are ever going to be seeing some action, it has to be around that Jarvan. And so when the spectator sees Jarvan going for a gank, he's not surprised by it because it all makes sense since you've predicted it earlier. He was like, oh yeah, Jarvan is going to be super proactive, right? Now you can also spend some time to explain why, and say that, yeah, he like top lane is going to be even, blah blah, mid lane is going to be even, so Jarvan has an advantage over Karthus, blah blah blah. Now, power spikes is something that we want to talk about as well, because let's say Karthus gets really fed, gets his Rabban death cap, or whatever he's building right now, I don't know. Um, he gets a nice item, so you want to set that up as well. So predictions can also be made from that, saying, oh yeah, Camille into set, really tough matchup, until Camille reaches like 3 items or so. If she was even before that with the set, it then gets really tough for anyone to compete because she becomes a 1v1 machine on the side lane. So watch out for these power spikes. Also, Camille has a really good spike at 1 item. Set depends on whatever item he builds. If he goes for BRK first, he's gonna be a 1v1 machine. Else, he will be having some trouble with trading sequences against Camille or against Syndra, for example. Aphelios also really good on 2 items, so watch out for that, because until then he's going to get pressured a lot by Xayah and Galio, maybe, whatever. So power spikes is something you want to base your predictions on. It's also something that you want to highlight, but we'll come to that later on in long-term versus short-term. Cooldowns can also be one aspect, but then again, we'll have to link it to short-term predictions into the mid-game. When I'm talking about cooldowns, I'm talking about either long, decisive cooldowns for the games, such as Requiem, Hero's Entrance, Shockwave, for example, or we are talking about summon spells. We'll come to that later on. Difficulty is very important. We are playing at an amateur level, so one of the things that you have to look at is how hard are all of these champions to play. Yeah, for sure. You might know that Gnar is able to land a destructive AoE ultimate and stuff, but how hard is Gnar to play? Is the player that plays it skilled enough to actually pull off the huge play that you want? This is mainly something that you will be linking to signature picks and pocket picks, because, for example, when you see Keyladder getting his Riven on the Rift, yeah, Riven is a very tough champion, very hard to play, and very hard to actually do stuff with it within a game. But when it comes to Keyladder, you know that this guy is insane on Riven, so it cancels out. Now, the second aspect on which you can make predictions, and this is also coming to the draft, by the way, is the players. So when you are used to seeing the same players over and over, when you know them a little bit and they are not complete strangers, you can start to make predictions based on these players' general performances. So, for example, you know that Henrik Jung is generally speaking a good AD carry. You know that Connie Gaspalev has a big tendency to step forward too much. So you can also make predictions based on that, saying, "Oh yeah, this player, if he gets caught again, this can be really big. This player, if he manages to, he's always managing to bait people out in team fights and then turn around, and he always has such a good kiting and etc. Keyladder, always the playmaker, not so blind. He's always picking up these assassins and finding, and he's most of the time the one who can keep his team afloat. So you can start making predictions based on carry players, like the big players of each teams. Now, team signatures is something that you also need to know the teams for. So, for example, let's say for a few seasons ago, this is something really difficult to insert into a cast, but for example, several seasons ago, we had a team here at Connecting that always liked to go for the 20-minute Baron. This was their specialty, and they were all the time doing that. So you can also factor this into the early game and the team comps, saying, yeah, but this team loves to do that. With that comp, it's going to be really hard, especially if the game state is like this. And then at 15 minutes, you can be like, okay, so game is like this, so we know that these guys, they will definitely be looking at that Baron. Now, how does this plays out from the current game state? Signature and pocket picks. That's where you take playmaking and difficulty into account and factor them in here. I talked about key ladders Riven, for example, but this is also something that you see a lot with like Gabwesh's Shaco, Flatline's Oriana, Tigretychus' Azir, Krolux's Gragas, etc. So all of these picks are typical picks that you want to look forward, saying, oh yeah, but this player on that champion, he's so good, he often takes over the game when he has that champion, and most of the time there is a specific way in which he plays whenever he has that. So I think that with these champions next to him, alongside him in the draft, he will be able to find these opportunities that he tends to look forward to, and so we can expect to see this and that when the game starts. Now, onto something more general, because for now we have been talking a lot about predictions in terms of champions and players. All of this is very much linked to the to the draft and the early game. But now, here comes long-term versus short-term predictions. Early game versus mid-game. So in the early game, you want to set up a lot of what's going to happen in the game, so that when the viewer sees things happening, he doesn't get surprised. He's like, oh yeah, this is completely normal, because I know that because the caster told me. So what you want is that in the early game you want to set up as much long-term predictions as possible. So saying all of the stuff about scaling, all of the stuff about aggression, and all of the stuff about power spikes has to go into the early game. So being like, yeah, we're going to see this and that, and most importantly, this is countered by this, so if this doesn't manage to get fed, it's because of this and that. Now, difficulty can also go into this, go into early game. Now, mid-game, however, is when your objectives shift. So mid-game is where you start to look at shorter terms predictions. So stuff like cooldowns, for example, stuff like state game neutral objectives and how they're going to be done. Because in the mid-game, it's no use to go into long-term. It's no use to go into long-term predictions, simply because everything can happen. There are a lot of items, a lot of power on both sides, so the game can go completely awry, especially since it's amateur level of play. So if you go into long-term analysis, there's a very high chance that this analysis is irrelevant by the time you hit the timestamp you were highlighting. So let's get into this game, for example. You're in such a game state here. We are 4 minutes into the game. You want to talk about how Aphelios outdoes Xayah in teamfights. How, for example, if Oriana gets fed, she can then utilize Jarvan Galio, stuff like this. Have Sett and Camille be highlight Sett and Camille being a very easily influenceable matchup. So jungle has a very high part in this, blah blah blah. You can also say, oh yeah, Karthus he wants to power farm. Jarvan right now he's top side. He has like a lot of camps that are up. Karthus on the other hand, he's gonna be full clearing for a while, doing like Raptors and Krugs. And if things don't work out in the top lane for Jarvan, then it's very terrible for him, because he missed out on a lot of experience on his camps, and he won't even get a reward for doing so. So basically, what you want to focus around is like jungle. Okay, short-term predictions. What are they going to do? Support, okay, short-term predictions. You can see Galio going into the river. River's completely warded, so there's no way for Galio to surprise anything, and the bot lane is backing away. Thresh, by the way, will be, since Aphelios and Thresh will be maybe more oppressive than Xayah and Galio. If that's your analysis, I'm not saying it's true, I'm just saying that it's something you might be bringing up. You can say, okay, so Thresh will be roaming a lot more than the Galio, but then as Galio gets his ultimate, blah blah blah. Okay? So this is going to be early game, when you want to set up what's going to be happening in the next few minutes, and a lot of the long-term analysis. Now, if we go into the mid game, things are very, very different here, because there's no point in highlighting long term anymore. We're not talking about, oh yeah, this Oriana and this Aphelios in the late game, they're gonna get fed or whatever. Yeah, but that's the late game, and they're already fed. So what's even the point of saying that? Saying, oh yeah, as the game goes on, they are going to be outscaling Syndra and Xayah even more. Okay, but they're already outscaling. Instead, talk about short term, saying, okay, to bring Syndra back and Syndra and Xayah back in this game, we need Camille and Karthus to actually act on whatever it is they have as advantages, right? So they are 2-1, blah blah blah. Top side is a huge mess. So we want to see more of Fortune. That guy has complete advantage over that set. Top side control, objectives. We have Drake coming through. How is bot lane? So we see well in shape 2-0 Aphelios. Gale Force and Berserker's Greaves completed. Xayah has the same, but she's alone right now. Is one level down. Galio's roaming, so all of that stuff. The reason why you want to go for a lot of short-term analysis is because basically you want to prepare for anything that could happen. Team fights, skirmishes, individual catches, solo kills, whatever. Because teams are most of the time quite unpredictable in their rotations around the map. Players are most of the time unpredictable in their positioning. And so you could argue, for example, that here, if Aphelios were to... there is a world in which Aphelios flashes in the Xayah, gets Gravitum, Thresh joins, then we have like random team fight number 3, just because Xayah got caught for no reason. So right there, this is where you're entering the mid game. About 15 minutes into the game, it's all about when the first rotations start to come in. You want to be a lot more into the short-term analysis. So saying, oh yeah, Camille and Karthus are going to be recalling, cashing on all the gold that they have. Jarvan is on the top side of the map, but he also has a lot of clear to do, and the Rift Herald is about to spawn soon. So it means that right now, top side of the map is going to be slightly in control. There will be a small window for blue side to act, and then when the red side, if the red side rushes straight towards that herald here, then they have a chance at getting it. But it means also that the Drake will not be prepared, and that all comes down to these two players here in the bottom lane who are battling it out. Oriana has complete pressure over Syndra, so Animal Alliance, blue side, they should have the control or whatever. So you see, it's all coming down to shorter terms predictions when you are coming to the mid game. Alright, so I hope that this video helped you out. If you have any additional tips, be sure to write them down in the comments. And once again, thank you for watching. I hope it helped. Leave a comment or leave a like, and see you on the casting desks. Bye bye.